His hands shake slightly as he signs the contract, the same hands that once pointed at me with such disgust. The office is silent except for the scratch of his pen across paper. I watch him write his signature under the line marked employee while I sit behind the mahogany desk that used to intimidate me in boardrooms just like this one. He won't look up, won't meet my eyes. But I can see the flush creeping up his neck, the way his jaw clenches when he realizes what this moment really means. 3 years ago, he told me I was no daughter of his. Today, he's asking me to be his boss. Hi, I'm Riley. And this is the story of how my father taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, completely by accident. The words hit me like a slap across the face, even though his voice stayed perfectly level. Clinical. He was discussing quarterly reports instead of disowning his only child. No daughter of mine does that. I stood in his home office, the one where I'd done homework at his feet as a kid, where he'd taught me to read financial statements before I could properly ride a bike. The same office where, 5 minutes earlier, I'd been stupid enough to think he might actually be proud of me. My hands were still trembling from excitement when I'd knocked on his door. The contract was still warm from the printer, the ink barely dry on the signature that would change everything. Belafonte Digital Marketing, my name on the letterhead, my company, my dream finally real after 2 years of 16-hour days and ramen noodle dinners. Dad, I did it, I'd said, practically bouncing on my toes. The Morrison account signed. It's a 2-year contract, and they want to expand into 3 more markets. This is it. This is everything we talked about when I was studying business. I'm actually doing it. But instead of the smile I'd pictured, instead of the hug I'd desperately wanted, his face had gone completely blank. That terrifying corporate mask he wore when he was about to fire someone. You mean this, influencer nonsense? He said the word like it tasted bitter. Social media marketing? The excitement in my chest turned to lead. It's not nonsense, Dad. It's a legitimate business. Digital marketing is the future of, it's not a real job, Riley. His voice cut through mine like a blade. It's playing on the internet, making silly videos, dancing for attention like some kind of. He trailed off, but I could hear the word he didn't say hanging in the air between us. Whore. My throat closed up. You don't understand what I actually do, I understand perfectly. He leaned back in his leather chair, the one that used to make him look powerful and wise to my 8-year-old eyes. Now it just made him look small. I understand that I raised you to be better than this. I sent you to Northwestern. I taught you about real business, about building something that matters. And this is what you do with it? The contract crumpled slightly in my grip. This does matter. I'm helping small businesses reach their customers. I'm creating jobs. I have 12 employees now, and we just, employees. He actually laughed, but there was no humor in it. What do you call them? Content creators? Influencers? Heat flooded my face. Marketing specialists, graphic designers, data analysts, real people doing real work. Real work. He stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the manicured lawn of his Westchester estate. The house I'd grown up in, the one that suddenly felt like a museum of a life that had never really belonged to me. Real work is what I do, Riley. What your grandfather did. Building something solid, something that lasts. I thought about the nights I'd stayed up until 3 a.m., learning SEO optimization and social media algorithms. The months I'd lived on my friend's couch because I couldn't afford rent and business expenses. The way my heart had hammered when I'd made my first hire, knowing I was responsible for someone else's livelihood. I am building something that lasts. No. He turned back to me, and his eyes were cold. Stranger's eyes. You're playing dress up in a world that isn't real. And I won't watch you embarrass this family any longer. The room went very quiet. Outside, I could hear the lawn service working, the distant hum of a leaf blower. Normal sounds from a normal afternoon that had just become the worst day of my life. What does that mean, exactly? It means no more money. No more bailouts when this little experiment fails. No more using the Belafonte name to get meetings. His voice was flat, matter of fact. And it means you're not welcome in this house until you come to your senses and find real employment. I stared at him. This man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd stayed up all night when I had pneumonia in 3rd grade, who'd cried at my graduation. This stranger wearing his face. You're cutting me off because I started a successful business? I'm cutting you off because you're embarrassing yourself, and by extension, this family. Belafonte Industries has a reputation to maintain. The contract in my hands felt suddenly heavy. 2 years of work, of believing in myself when no one else would. Of proving I could do this, that his lessons had meant something after all. I see. My voice came out steadier than I felt. So when I succeed, it's an embarrassment. When I fail, I come crawling back for real employment. When you grow up, he corrected, you'll understand the difference between playing games and building a legacy. I looked around the office one more time. At the diplomas on the wall, the photos of him with senators and CEOs, the crystal awards from the Chamber of Commerce. All the things that had seemed so important when I was little, when I'd wanted nothing more than to make him proud. You know what, Dad? I folded the contract carefully, sliding it back into my bag. You're right about one thing. This is about building a legacy. Something flickered in his eyes, maybe confusion, maybe the first hint of doubt. I'm going to build something so successful, so undeniably real, that you'll have to eat every word you just said. I walked toward the door, my legs somehow steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. And when I do, I hope you remember this conversation. I hope you remember the day you looked your daughter in the eye and told her that her dreams weren't good enough for the Belafonte name. I paused at the threshold, my hand on the doorframe of the room where I'd spent so many hours learning to be like him. Because I'm going to make sure that name means something more than just your approval. The last thing I heard before I walked out was the soft creak of his chair as he sat down. He didn't call after me. Didn't take it back. And as I drove away from the house where I'd lived for 26 years, I realized he'd just given me the greatest gift of my life. He'd set me free. The first month was hell. Not because the business was failing, it wasn't. The Morrison contract was just the beginning. Word spread fast in the small business community, and suddenly everyone wanted the girl who'd tripled Morrison's online sales in 6 weeks. But success doesn't pay for therapy, and I was drowning in feelings I'd never had to face before. I'd moved into a studio apartment in Brooklyn, the kind of place where you can hear your neighbor's Netflix through the walls and the radiator sounds like it's trying to communicate with aliens. It was a 40-minute subway ride from the Manhattan office I was renting, but it was mine. No trust fund, no family money, no safety net. Just me, my laptop, and a rage so pure it could power half of Queens. You look like shit, Mia announced, setting a coffee cup down on my desk with more force than necessary. She was my first hire, a graphic designer I'd poached from a midtown agency who'd taken a pay cut just to work somewhere that didn't treat creativity like a dirty word. Thanks for the pep talk, Maya. I didn't look up from my screen, where I was building a pitch deck for a potential client. A restaurant chain with 37 locations who wanted to modernize their entire digital presence. I'm serious, Riley. When's the last time you went home? I gestured vaguely at the small couch in the corner of our office. Define home. Maya sat down across from my desk, her dark eyes serious. He really got to you, didn't he? Your dad. The spreadsheet on my screen blurred slightly. I blinked hard, forcing my focus back to the numbers. He did me a favor. By cutting you off? By calling your work fake? By showing me exactly who he is. My fingers moved across the keyboard, calculating projected revenue for the restaurant campaign. And exactly who I don't want to be. The truth was more complicated, of course. The truth was that I woke up every morning with his voice in my head, telling me this wasn't real work. That I was just playing dress up in a grown-up world. The truth was that every time a client signed with us, part of me wanted to call him, to prove that he'd been wrong. But a bigger part of me was starting to realize something else entirely. I was getting good at this. Really good. Earth to Riley. Maya waved a hand in front of my face. The restaurant people are here. I looked up to see Marcus Chin, the owner of Jade Garden Collective, walking through our glass doors with his daughter Karen. Marcus was old-school Asian American entrepreneurship, built his empire with cash-only diners and 12-hour days. Karen was Harvard MBA, second-generation confidence, and completely skeptical that a 26-year-old in Brooklyn could understand their family business. Mr. Chen, Karen. I stood up, smoothing down my blazer. Thank you for coming out to Brooklyn. This is. Karen looked around our open office, taking in Maya's vintage band posters and the exposed brick walls. Interesting. I'd learned to read that tone. It meant not what we expected. It meant, "Are you sure you're qualified for this? Let me show you what we've prepared." I led them to our conference room, really just a corner with a table and chairs, but it had a view of the Manhattan skyline that made everything feel more legitimate. The next hour was a masterclass in controlled demolition. I didn't just present their marketing strategy. I dissected their current approach, showed them exactly how much money they were losing by not understanding their customer data, and then rebuilt their entire digital presence from the ground up. I had demographic breakdowns for each restaurant location, seasonal trends they'd never tracked, and a social media strategy that would showcase their food culture instead of just advertising specials. "You want to increase foot traffic by 30% in the next quarter," I said, pulling up the final slide. "But more than that, you want to build something your grandchildren will be proud to inherit. Something that honors where you came from while reaching customers who don't even know they need what you're offering yet." Marcus was nodding slowly. Karen was taking notes, her skepticism replaced by something that looked like surprise. "How did you know about the inheritance piece?" Marcus asked quietly. "I thought about my father's office, about legacy and reputation and the weight of family names. Because I understand what it means to build something that lasts. And I understand what it means when the people who should support you don't believe in your vision." Karen looked up from her notes. "Dad's been struggling with traditionalists in the family. People who think digital marketing isn't necessary for restaurants." "Let me guess," I said, leaning back in my chair. "They think social media is just for kids playing around. That real businesses don't need to worry about online presence." Marcus laughed, but it sounded tired. "My brother-in-law owns 4 restaurants in Chinatown. He calls what you do expensive nonsense." The familiar sting hit my chest, but this time it felt different. This time, it felt like fuel. "Mr. Chin, in 6 months, your brother-in-law is going to be asking you how you tripled your delivery orders and started attracting customers from neighborhoods he's never even heard of. And when he does, you can tell him it was all expensive nonsense." Karen smiled. Marcus pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my attorney," he said. "We'll have contracts drafted by tomorrow." After they left, Maya poured herself a glass of the wine we kept for celebrations. "Damn, girl. That was surgical." "That was personal," I corrected, but I was smiling now. "And that was a 2-year contract worth more than my father makes in 6 months. I walked to the window, looking out at the city where I was building something he couldn't understand. Where I was proving that his definition of success was small, limited, and completely outdated. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Riley Belafonte? This is Amanda Morrison from Morrison Industries. Your campaign exceeded every projection. I'm wondering if you'd be interested in discussing a much larger opportunity. We're acquiring several companies next year and need someone to handle their complete digital transformation. Please call me." I stared at the message, reading it twice. Morrison Industries wasn't just any company. They were one of the largest manufacturing conglomerates on the East Coast. The kind of company my father had always talked about with reverence. The kind of company that probably did business with Belafonte Industries. Maya looked over my shoulder. "Holy shit. That's 3 times bigger than anything we've done before." I was already calculating. If Morrison was acquiring companies, they'd need comprehensive digital overhauls for each acquisition. They'd need a team that could handle enterprise-level campaigns. They'd need someone who understood both traditional business and digital innovation. They'd need someone exactly like me. I looked at Maya, who was grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "Call everyone," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "Emergency team meeting. We're about to get very busy." As I dialed Amanda Morrison's number, I realized that for the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about my father at all. I was thinking about what I was going to build next. And it was going to be impossible to ignore. 18 months later, I was sitting in a Manhattan boardroom that cost more per hour to rent than most people's rent, watching 5 CEOs fight over who got to hire me next. Belafonte Digital transformed our entire customer acquisition strategy, Amanda Morrison was saying to the room. Revenue increased 400% in the first year alone. I kept my expression neutral, professional, but inside I was vibrating with satisfaction. The girl who'd been told she wasn't doing real work now had a waiting list of Fortune 500 companies begging for meetings. The automotive campaign was groundbreaking. added James Wellington from Wellington Holdings. Riley, your team's approach to cross-platform integration is unlike anything we've seen. Maya caught my eye from across the table and barely suppressed a smirk. We now had 47 employees across 3 offices. I'd been featured on the cover of Forbes Under 30, and Inc. magazine had called my company the future of digital transformation for traditional industries. But the real validation had come 3 weeks ago, in the form of a phone call I'd been expecting for months. My assistant had buzzed in during a strategy meeting. Riley, there's a Mr. Richard Belafonte on line 2. He says he's your father. The conference room had gone quiet. My entire team knew the story by now, not because I'd shared it, but because success makes people curious about your origin story. They knew about the man who'd called their jobs fake, who'd cut off his daughter for daring to build something he didn't understand. Tell him I'll call him back, I'd said, my voice steady. I never did. But I knew why he'd called. Belafonte Industries was hemorrhaging money. Traditional manufacturing was struggling, and companies like his were getting killed by competitors who understood digital marketing. His biggest clients were jumping ship to businesses that could reach customers online, that understood e-commerce and social engagement. He needed help. And there was only one digital marketing firm in the Northeast with the track record to save his company. Mine. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. Now, 3 weeks later, I was walking out of the Manhattan boardroom when my phone rang. Maya glanced at the screen and raised an eyebrow. Your father. Again. This time, I answered. Hello, Dad. Riley. His voice sounded older, strained. Thank you for taking my call. I waited. Let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. I need to speak with you. About business. I assumed so. You've called 8 times. Would you be willing to meet? For coffee? I looked out at the Manhattan skyline, at the city where I'd built everything he'd said was impossible. I don't drink coffee anymore, Dad. But I have an office. You can come to me. The pause was long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Of course. When would be convenient? Tomorrow. 2 o'clock. Maya will send you the address. Riley, I guess see you tomorrow, Dad. I hung up and handed the phone back to Maya. This should be interesting, she said. This should be justice. The next afternoon, I watched from my office window as a black town car pulled up outside our building. My father stepped out, and for the first time in my life, he looked small. His suit was still expensive, his posture still corporate perfect, but something fundamental had shifted. He was coming to me. Maya buzzed him up, and I listened to his footsteps on the stairs. We'd moved to a converted warehouse in Dumbo, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of space that screamed creative industry success. When he walked through our glass doors, I watched him take in the awards on the walls, the team of designers and analysts working at standing desks, the energy of a company that was growing too fast to keep up with itself. Mr. Belafonte, Maya said, all professional courtesy. Riley's waiting for you in the conference room. I'd chosen the big conference room deliberately, the one with the view of Manhattan, the one where we held our most important client meetings. I was sitting at the head of the table when he walked in, wearing the navy blue blazer that had been on the cover of Forbes, my hair pulled back in the severe bun that had become my signature look. He stopped in the doorway, and I saw him take it all in. The success, the confidence, the fact that his little girl who played on the internet now commanded a room like this. Riley, Dad. Please, sit down. He chose a chair halfway down the table, not directly across from me but not at the far end either. Switzerland positioning. Diplomatic distance. Your company is impressive, he said, looking around the room. This space, your team, it's very professional. Thank you. I kept my voice neutral. Maya tells me you wanted to discuss business. The flush started at his collar, creeping up his neck. This was the hard part, the part where his pride had to break. Belafonte Industries is struggling. We've lost several major contracts in the past year. Our competitors are reaching customers in ways we don't understand. Digital marketing. Yes. The word came out tight, it physically hurt him. We need help transitioning to your world. Online presence, social media, all of it. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. And you came to me. You're the best. Simple, direct, and it obviously killed him to say it. Everyone I've spoken to says Belafonte Digital is the only firm that can handle a transformation this size. Belafonte Digital. I let the name hang in the air between us. Do you know why I chose that name, Dad? He shook his head. Because I wanted to prove that a Belafonte could build something that mattered. Something real. Something that lasted. I stood up, walking to the window. I wanted to make you proud of what that name could represent. Riley, but you taught me something much more valuable than that. I turned back to face him. You taught me that I don't need your approval to know what I've built is real. The silence stretched between us, 28 years of father and daughter, of expectations and disappointments, and the gulf between who he'd wanted me to be and who I'd become. I can help you, I said finally. But not as your daughter asking for forgiveness. As a CEO discussing a business relationship. Hope flickered in his eyes. Of course. Whatever terms you think are appropriate. My terms are simple. I walked back to the table, pulling out a contract I'd had legal draft the moment I'd heard he was calling. Belafonte Industries becomes a client of Belafonte Digital. Standard 2-year agreement, with performance benchmarks and renewal options. He nodded eagerly. Yes, absolutely. And, I continued, my voice steady, you personally will serve as our internal liaison. You'll report directly to me on all digital transformation initiatives. You'll attend our weekly strategy meetings, implement our recommendations, and provide monthly progress reports. The reality of what I was saying settled over his face slowly. You want me to work for you? I want you to work with us. As part of our team, taking direction from our digital strategists, including me. I slid the contract across the table. The position comes with a consultant fee, of course. Very generous, actually. His hands were shaking slightly as he picked up the contract. The same hands that had built a manufacturing empire, that had pointed at me with such disgust 18 months ago. This is justice, I said quietly. This is what happens when you call someone's work fake and it turns out to be exactly what you need to survive. He read through the contract slowly, and I watched his face as he processed every clause, every requirement, every beautifully crafted detail that would make him answerable to the daughter he'd disowned. The fee structure, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. This is more than I pay my VPs. You're not hiring a VP, Dad. You're hiring the woman who built the most successful digital marketing firm on the East Coast. The one who's going to save your company from irrelevance. He looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd walked into his office with that first contract, I saw something like recognition in his eyes. Not approval, I was past needing that. But acknowledgement, respect. The understanding that his little girl had become someone formidable. Where do I sign? I walked around the table and set a pen down next to the signature line marked employee. His hands shook as he signed his name under mine, and the sound of the pen scratching across paper was the only noise in the room. When he finished, he set the pen down carefully and looked up at me. Riley, welcome to the team, Dad. I took the contract, my signature above his, my company letterhead at the top. Maya will send you the onboarding materials. We start Monday. As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. I was wrong, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. About what you do. About what you built. I was wrong. I watched him walk toward the elevator, this man who'd shaped my entire understanding of success and failure, who'd broken my heart and accidentally set me free. Yes, I said to the empty conference room. You were. But as I looked out at the city where I'd built my empire, I realized something else entirely. I'd stopped caring whether he was wrong or right about me. I knew exactly who I was now. And that was worth more than any apology he could offer. Maya appeared in the doorway, grinning. So, how does it feel to be your father's boss? I smiled back, filing the contract in my desk drawer next to the Forbes cover and the industry awards. The best revenge is success, I said. And the best success is the kind your enemies have to pay you for. Outside, the Manhattan skyline stretched endlessly, full of possibilities I was just beginning to imagine. Some stories end with forgiveness, some end with revenge. The best ones end with you finally becoming exactly who you were meant to be all along. If this story resonated with you, remember, the people who doubt your dreams today might be the ones asking for your help tomorrow. Build something so undeniable that even your critics become clients.